Hey everyone, hope you're doing well out there. In this episode, I sat down with Yons. He's a Grammy Award winning producer, artist, and teacher. We talked about FL Studio, Ninth Wonder, and the wisdom that he wishes to impart onto his students. As always, thank you so much for all of your support. I couldn't do any of this without you. With that being said, here's Yons. You are a teacher, artist, lyricist, instrumentalist, and now Grammy winning producer. I first heard of your work as Eons D a decade ago during my time with Little Heart Records. And when I was first starting my engineering journey in 2019, I was lucky enough to sit down with you several times at your home to ask questions about Studio and Logic Pro. The music you've made and your selflessness has made a genuine source of inspiration for myself and many others throughout the years, and will undoubtedly have a legacy of positivity for years to come. Yons, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a joy. It's a pleasure.
So I first wanted to talk about your early life and inspiration.
hmm
So I found that we all take some part we take some part of the culture and environment of where we grow up, and whether consciousness or subconscious, it becomes a part of us and oftentimes manifests itself in the music and art we make.
hmm
So how would you describe the music and culture of St. Petersburg, Florida, and how much of St. Pete has a home in the music that you create?
Oh, yeah, it's a great question, man. I grew up mostly in church, man, doing music. So I kind of grew up on a lot of like Southern gospel, and also a lot of just kind of Baptist quartet music. Um, and as far as local, to St. Petersburg, I don't know if you know Kaya, like My Neck, My Back. Oh, you remember
Yeah.
that song? Like that, she was big growing up in
Mm,
Tampa. So she's from Tampa. So that was like local music was just Kaya for real.
yeah.
Like we didn't really have anything. There was some artists who um were, I guess we had I grew up at the church that I grew up in, right? Two of the musicians in the church, they were the pastor's kids. They kind of made a hit song called you might not even remember this song. It was hot in the 90s. It was called Let Me See You Squirrel. It was a dance that Ray Lewis used to do
Oh, okay.
for the Ravens, and it was on the soundtrack for this movie called Booty Call, like with
Mm,
Jamie Foxx. So it was like
okay.
that was their claim to fame. But they had connections with Jodeci,
Oh,
because
wow.
Jodeci grew up in the same like church organization I grew up in. So we grew up on like Jodeci, and so the R&B influence was definitely big on me growing up. So they were like really close. So we would go to like church conventions, and like Jodeci would be there, and their Jodeci's dad, his name was Don DeGreat. He was like a musical hero of mine growing up. So he's like a pastor, but he was like a really awesome musician. So like growing up, we would go to conventions and see him perform, or like listen to his music and then listen to Jodeci. But we weren't really allowed to listen to Jodeci because obviously they were like very sexual. But the influence was there. They would change a lot of stuff to make it like gospel music during church.
Hmm.
But it was all those chords and like just the sounds of what was hot at the time. Like we would incorporate that into like making gospel music while we was in church. And so that was a big influence for sure growing up.
Awesome. During that time, what were some of your like favorite artists like when you were growing up there?
Yeah, so my favorite artist growing up, man, definitely Outkast. When I heard, I think it was Rosa Parks that got me into Outkast. Um, that was a huge influence. Outkast, Kirk Franklin. I remember he had a song called Stomp, and it was bigger than just like the church. You would just see the dope boys like playing Stomp, riding
Mm,
down the street in like a suburban. You know what I'm saying?
wow.
Like it was a big record. So like Kirk Franklin was huge. um Influence on me, yeah, like Outkast, Hot Boys, um Lil Wayne, like Bling Bling, you know what I'm saying, BG, you know what I'm saying, Birdman, Manny Fresh. Those was like big influences growing up.
Mm,
Manny Fresh's production style. Trying to make sure I don't miss something. Mary Mary, I was a huge like fan of Mary Mary growing up. And it was like pretty much whatever was like popping. Uh, Mason Diddy, uh, when he was Puff Daddy, Biggie. Then Jay Z came along when I got like around early high school. Big fan of like Big Pimpin' and like Jay Z's hit records around
mm,
like Life and Times era. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah,
Uh,
that's such a unique and like special time for
yeah,
that
yeah,
genre of music.
for sure.
How did your local Baptist church provide inspiration during your childhood?
Well, it was a Pentecostal church,
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah. But I mean, it's we had some Baptist influence, so we definitely I feel like it was a mix maybe between Baptist and Pentecostal, maybe.
Okay.
But we're kind of non-denominational church. But you said how did it have influence on what?
How did it have how did it provide inspiration during your childhood?
Oh yeah, man. So growing up in church, it was a way out of the hood for me. So it was like everybody I was around was getting into like, selling drugs or like gangs and stuff. So church was kind of like, and it was a reluctant thing for me. I wanted to hang out with everybody else. But
Hmm.
my pops was like, "No, you're gonna go to church." So it
Right.
was like I would go way on the other side of town because I grew up in St. Petersburg, but our church was in Pinellas Park. So we drive way on the other side of town to go to church, like sometimes up to 4 or 5 times a week. And so where everybody was like out, doing whatever, I would be at church on like Wednesday night, like Monday, Friday, Sunday, sometimes Saturday. So we was at church a lot growing up. So it was like a pretty much like a way for me to not get like caught up in what was going on around me
Mhm.
in the neighborhood. And so yeah, it was a huge inspiration for sure.
Awesome. Um, what impact did your annual youth trips between Southern Indiana and Louisville have on your dreams and aspirations during that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. Growing up, we didn't really get a chance to go a lot of places. So the only vacation I would have was coming up to Indiana every year,
Hmm.
and so it was like for us, it was everything just to
Yeah.
like be able to take a trip, and we like drive through Tennessee and see the mountains, and so it was for us, it was just like it was everything because we
Hmm.
only got a chance to come up here maybe like 3 times a year, something like that, and so for us, it was what we looked forward to growing up because it was just like we was pretty much in the hood all day, and then we get a chance to kind of take a trip and hang with other friends in the church. So that was something we definitely look forward to.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like really special for that like time in your life to be able
Yeah,
to like travel from one place to another wherever it is, you know.
yeah,
Like when
yeah.
you're a kid, even if it's down the street, you're like, this is huge.
This
But
is
when it's to
different. Yeah,
another state, it's like you're traveling the world, you
yeah.
know.
We look forward to that for sure.
Um, can you take us back to winning a talent show at St. Pete College and how it
Yeah,
shaped your path in music?
yeah, man. We was it's funny, man. There's a rapper now who's he's a popular Christian rapper now named KB. But when he first was getting started, we all went to St. Petersburg College. I was in my first year, and him and my cousin were in. They were seniors at a high school program at the college campus, and so people knew us as like rappers on the campus because we would have back. This was like Eminem, like 8 Mile era.
Oh
So it
wow.
was like everybody was doing ciphers at school, and it was popular. Like hip hop was like this cultural like thing at the time. So it was nothing to go on campus and you see like a huge rap
Mhm.
cipher. So we'd
That's
be in
so
these
cool.
rap ciphers and like, just rapping. And there was this guy named Big Cuz at the time who was like a evangelist on the school, premises, but he was also a rapper. And so he would kind of do these kind of Christian or gospel like outreach hip hop things.
Mhm.
So that's how we got kind of started with that. And then that kind of developed into like us creating our own music. So there was a talent show, and we had this song at the time called like "Fired Up" or something. It was kind of like a pep rally almost song. It was just like
Mhm.
a very high energy song, um, and we performed that song, and we ended up winning. So it was pretty big for us at the time, and it was like it let us know like we're meant to do this,
Mhm.
because there was a lot of different. It wasn't just rap at a talent show. There's people playing guitar. There was like people doing, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like even outside of music, it was like a general kind of talent show.
Yeah,
And I think we won the judges over in the crowd at the time. So,
that's
and we
awesome.
was like 18, so yeah, we were like, yeah, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, yeah, it just seems to make sense in that
Yeah.
moment. Absolutely. Can you share more about your early experiences making demos with a tape recorder and a Casio keyboard? And I got to know about the GoldenEye menu music.
Oh man, that's a Nardwar question right there.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, man. My first recordings were like my sisters used to get these perms called Just for Me, and it came with this little tape with the song on it. And I would have sampled that, by the way. But yeah, I used to record over that because we had like tons of them. So it was like we still
Right.
had the original song,
Yeah.
but I used to record over them whenever they get a new perm, and I would put my songs on them. And I had this TDK recorder, and I had this other boombox that I used to play the beat from, and then record myself into the TDK recorder with the beat playing from the other boombox. And so that's how I made like my first little mixtapes. Was like
Wow.
we take, I think I was making beats on like a Casio keyboard, or like we took some beats off of video games. So like GoldenEye in the wait menu, they had this like dope beat.
Oh yeah.
So we made our first song over that, recorded into a TDK recorder, just playing it off the I don't know what it was, this Nintendo. What was
64.
was it the 64 at the time?
Nintendo 64, I think, was the GoldenEye.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been it might
Console.
have been 64. Yeah. Or was it
That's really
GameCube or
cool.
one of the, yeah. I just
Yeah,
remember.
I'm sure it's ported to a few things.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, that is awesome. I
yeah.
remember talking to Dom B and
Uh-huh.
how he said, you know, he would have to rap verses straight through because he'd record onto like a radio, like a boombox,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
said you'd have to rap straight through
Hmm.
hooks, like verses into
Yeah,
hooks,
everything, yeah.
straight through, no mess ups, and then you have to do the
Yeah.
same thing with the ad libs, and it's just like it's just different because when you're so hungry, like it's
Uh-huh.
just it's a joyful
Yeah,
experience
it
the
was
whole
like we
time.
was excited to just like you learn a lot about recording
Yes, you do.
and
Yeah.
like sound, and like how if I angle my head this way, it sounds different. Or if I get a little closer, then I get the proximity effect, so my voice might sound a little deeper. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, you learn about how to record, and you also learn about performing because it's like, yeah, you got to start all the way over
Right. Yeah.
if you don't get it right. So you kind of
Absolutely.
learn breath control, and it's stuff that a lot of kids nowadays I feel are missing because it's so much, like you have so many like ways to like shortcut that.
Hmm.
So I feel like performers now have it harder because they're just not ready yet as easily
Right.
with all the tools in the studio. So one thing I try to do with students now is just try to get them more used to like being performers, you know,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
not getting crutched by like punching in, or like, because you're gonna have to, when you perform your song live, it's like yeah, you're gonna have to know how to perform it. So you might as well perform it in the studio, you know.
Yeah. I often think about how, while there's so many advantages, and like, thank God we are where we're at technology wise, where a college student can record a Grammy winning album in their dorm room,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because the stems they record on their Focusrite, they're good
They're good
enough.
enough. Yeah.
They really are.
On the
And
phone.
that's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that like anybody can make industry quality music at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
Facts.
And that creates a freedom, and like, and it's that should be that way because music shouldn't be gate kept behind like, you know, $50,000 studios
Yeah.
or something. But
Facts.
I also can see how I'll phrase it this way: those who start without the best technology or most advanced tech, like to record themselves or anything they're doing, I think that almost those who are given, like, say,
Mm-hmm.
the the CG 100 like studio, like, or if they
Oh
start with
yeah.
like an SM7B or something,
Yeah.
then you're almost at a disadvantage starting out
Mm-hmm.
because you don't get to know your gear as much. I talk about it with guitar.
Yeah.
I'd rather, you know, I'd want a young person to start with like an old beat up guitar that you have to change the strings on. You have
Mm-hmm.
to take you have to take it apart at
Yeah.
times to fix it, you know, to fix the input jack that's always wiggling around in
Mm-hmm.
there, and you got to learn how to do the intonation on it, just like something that is just an old beat up like
But your
guitar,
ears are
because you
getting,
learn how to use it
yeah.
that way. If you're just given a Les Paul beautiful guitar right off
You're
the bat,
spoiled.
yeah,
Yeah.
you don't get to appreciate what you have
No,
at
that's
that
real.
point. And so I definitely
Yeah.
compare that, you know, in photography too. I see
Mm.
in Lightroom you can just affect lighting so
Mhm.
easily. You can take the subject and expose the subject more, and take the
Mhm.
background and underexpose it more if your
Mhm.
lighting conditions weren't right because you
Mhm.
just didn't decide to put your lighting correctly. And
Yeah,
so
so it's a
it's
crutch,
it's
yeah.
a really great, it can be a crutch, but it can also be a really great tool for,
Mhm.
so it's like, oh, I got this really great shot. I
But
did
yeah,
everything right, but this something happened, and then you can
to
go in and
fix it.
repair it. And
Yeah.
so I do see how things we use to repair, like AI tools and stuff, are being more used as the primary method of creating,
Yeah.
instead of a way to repair something or to discover something in post afterwards, instead of saying, oh, we'll
Mhm.
just, I think it just all goes back to the old adage of we'll fix it in post kind of
Yeah,
ideology, instead of
yeah.
we'll fix it in pre ideology.
Yep.
But it also comes down to what you're given as a kid. You almost want your kid to have an old beat up microphone, and like
Mhm.
you kind of want to give them that experience, because now I just watched the new like iPhone,
Yeah, 15 was it?
yeah,
Or
the
16?
16.
Yeah.
I watched that whole presentation, and they have some really cool stuff with audio coming up with the voice memos, where
I
it's
heard
going to
about that.
be
Like, what
very
is that?
dynamically, it's going to be able to dynamically take out any, like, and it's going to be do it well, where it takes out any of the sound around you, and it will isolate your voice. But not only that, you can record a guitar on your phone, and then record, like, just on your phone over that guitar part, and it will create stems out of it in a voice memo, and have isolated stems for you.
What?
And you can also record it in using spatial audio, and so you can
So for
place your
like
phone in
the
front of you for
Dolby
Adobe
Atmos?
Atmos.
That's
Yeah,
wild.
for mixing it. So you can take your voice memo note, put it into Logic, and then open up in the Atmos menu in Logic,
That's
and
crazy.
it will be able to use some of that 3D information, the gyroscoping information within your iPhone, that will
Yeah.
translate to the gyroscope in your AirPods.
That's
And
insane,
so they're
man.
going to be able to talk to each other. And
Wow.
it's a really cool, for musicians. They're doing stuff with AirPods, where like they're making AirPods where you as a musician will be able to use them as in-ear monitors
Mhm.
on stage, and there also be hearing protection as well at the same time.
Wow. That's
So
crazy, man.
yeah, it's really cool seeing like where tech's taking us, but there's something to be said about, and something to be said about kind of having to struggle at first, instead of having this thing that's like, oh, it just does it for you. Okay, I don't need
Mhm.
to learn about that process.
Mhm.
Eventually we're going to have things that get phased out, like taking noise out. There's just an art to EQing
Yeah.
something, to take a room sound out or something out of it, that's just sweeping across the spectrum to
Mhm.
find frequencies
Mhm.
that you don't want in there.
Mhm.
And eventually there's
That's
going
be
to just
done
be a
away with that.
program that just does it
Does
for
it
you.
for
There
you.
already is. Track Spacer is very good.
Track spacer, they just automatically just pick
Yeah,
stuff.
it dynamically ducks a frequency that you sidechain it to. So you assign it a sidechain, and you're
Mhm.
like, listen, if say you put Track Spacer on your instrumental,
Mhm.
and then you have it sidechained to a vocal,
Mhm.
then it will dynamically duck. So the way I used to do it, and the way I think we all used to do it, is we used to just, duck at 800, duck at 8K,
Yeah.
and just to give the vocals a bit more space, because you
Mhm.
just kind of have to carve, especially when you're two tracking it with a
Yeah.
YouTube beat that's been mastered to be like, limited
Mhm.
to point one. It's
Yeah.
just completely. Yeah, it's as loud as it can possibly be. So you're fighting for your life to get
Yeah.
space for it.
Yeah.
So usually scoop a big, canyon out of it,
Yeah.
and then that's the whole song. But now they have an AI track spacer that dynamically ducks only when the vocal's present on the song, and not
Mhm.
only that, it carves a surgical space for it that's
That's
unique
dope.
to the voice. And if you've, I've heard it used in mixes already in professional settings,
And it's just
where it ducks it too much. And I think
mm.
you've probably heard this, I imagine, where a vocal goes onto a track and you hear the instrumental duck in volume.
Yeah.
That's
That's the
that's
effect.
essentially the same. If not
Mhm.
the same thing, it's something similar to that, where they're dialing it in too much, and it's
Gotcha.
all about doing
Yeah,
it
like
in small
maybe like
amounts.
using the
Yeah,
wet input to kind of like, turn it down a little bit or
exactly.
something.
But
Yeah.
it's easy to go too far with it.
Yeah, yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine. Yeah, you probably just get used to it and just like, I'm gonna just
yeah,
set this preset and yeah, you probably have
yeah.
people who don't even listen. They just I'm gonna just set it as a preset,
Mm.
it should do its thing. So yeah,
Yeah, it's really incredible, and yeah.
that's
But
interesting, man.
speaking of DAWs and software,
Hmm.
can you tell us how Darius's gift of FL Studio impacted your journey into
Oh
music
man,
production?
that's another gnarly word. Oh man, rest in peace, Darius, man. Man, he was very influential, man, and instrumental because like before FL Studio, I was using the TDK tapes. That's what I was recording with.
Mhm.
And so he came down from here. He lived in Indiana. He used to go to the church that we used to visit here. So he moved down to Tampa to be part of I think it was the International Academy of Design, or it's one of the art schools there, similar to Full Sail. And yeah, we started getting up with him, and he just was knowledgeable about a lot of production stuff. He introduced me to Kanye. Like the first time I heard College Dropout, before months before it released, he had it on like a I guess Kanye had a demo version of it, and
Wow.
so we were just driving across that long bridge from Tampa, listening to the College, and I was blown away. And it was
Mhm.
just like, man, Darius got the music, man.
Yeah.
So he hooked us up with FL, well, Fruity Loops 3, I think at the time. It was 3 or
Mhm.
4, one of them. And and I just loved it immediately. Like I was like, yo, this is what because my mom had this laptop. She worked at Head Start. So she had this little IBM ThinkPad, I think, and half the screen was missing. Like it was just cracked, and that's why they kind of let her take it home or whatever. And I guess it was supposed to be thrown away, but it
Mhm.
still worked. It's just half the screen was cracked. So I would like have to drag FL Studio to the bottom
Oh my
half of the
gosh.
screen, and I'm just dialing in, the little like step what did you call it now? The step sequencer, the piano roll,
Yeah.
and just like just making beats or whatever. And that's back when they just had like all the electronic drum sounds or whatever.
Mhm.
And I know those beats suck, but we was crazy. I was crazy about them. I was like, yo,
Yeah, absolutely.
everybody listen to this beat.
Mhm.
And we used to have this little I don't know if you remember these things, but it was like a dummy tape that had like a
A wire coming out of it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We used to plug the laptop in the car, put a little dummy tape in, and listen to the beats in the car. Oh man, that was like the best. You could really hear what your beat sounded like in the car, like the bass and everything. And so once I learned how to sample with the Fruity Slicer, it was a wrap.
Oh, I bet.
It's like once I got the slicer and was like, yo, we can import songs and sample, because at the time the real producers had NPCs. So you almost felt Fruity Loops was like a joke. We would go to Guitar Center, and I remember the dude that worked there in the like pro audio area.
Mhm.
He's like, oh yeah, y'all need to get off Fruity Loops, man. Y'all need an NPC, man.
Mhm.
He said, that's what Jake Dilla, said.
Yeah.
That's what so and so. When Ninth Wonder came out using FL Studio, it
Yeah.
changed the game. It
Yeah.
was like, yo, Ninth Wonder, is I think he did the beats on, well, obviously he did Little Brother, but when he did Threats for Jay-Z,
Mm.
it was like, yo, you can use Fruity Loops and make real hip hop.
Yeah.
It was over.
It just takes one person
It
to do
took one
that. And
person.
now I think Metro Boomin is that person for a lot of people
Yeah,
where it's like they said you can't do it this way. It's like
exactly.
no, you can. Absolutely.
Exactly, man. And it's like it proved that, because the biggest thing was they were saying that making beats on the computer didn't hit hard enough. They didn't have the right sound or whatever. So Ninth
Right.
Wonder stuff, people thought he was using the MPC. They thought he
Mhm.
was using, the Renaissance or whatever. And he was just like, no. They was like, what you do your drums with? It's like, okay, you might sequence in FL, but you obviously recording it
Right.
out. He's like, nah, I'm doing everything
Mhm.
in FL. And nowadays, because like, what? How you getting that sound?
Right.
And it just shows the technique,
Yeah.
because I recorded everything. We did all of our recordings and beats in FL Studio, and we didn't even have the producer edition at the time. So we would record with Sound Recorder and then like bring it in manually. Like, so I'm manually lining
Mm.
up each
Oh my gosh.
vocal take, like
Oh my God.
in FL
That's
Studio
crazy.
off of Sound Recorder clips. Um, and not even like this, there was no like timeline or whatever.
Mm.
I was literally putting them as uh inputs on the step sequencer.
Oh my
So it's like
God.
triggering them like the same way you would trigger a kick or whatever.
That's insane.
Yeah, yeah. So I had to like edit it the right way too. Like I had to
Right.
cut it at the right spot. Trial and error, man. Sons of trial and error. But once we got it lined up, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, this works.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it was dope. But yeah, that's all it took, man. People would think Like we would go to events or other studios, and they'd be like, "Yo, who mix y'all stuff, man? It sound crazy. What version of Pro Tools you got? What system you got, or whatever?" And I would
Mm.
say FL Studio, and they'd be like, "Oh man, you need to get on Pro Tools."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, man, you need to get Pro Tools, man. Like that's what y'all using FL. It was like they was hyped about it until I said it was
Yeah.
FL, and then it
Yeah.
was like then they started hearing all kinds of stuff wrong with
Right.
it.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's
That's how
like
it goes. Yeah, it's really incredible to see. Yeah, and I think just time is going to show this over and over again. It's like whatever you're working on, it's the artist behind it and their
exactly,
motivation. They'll be. We've seen it with BandLab.
exactly.
That's
BandLab is
the
all you
newest one
need.
that people snuff
Shout
their
out
nose at.
Zalil, man. I'm gonna tag him shout out Zalil. He's one of the students at AMP. He graduated.
Hmm.
This kid, you gotta check out this kid's music. He uses BandLab. It's the most amazing, like electronic, like not gassing it. This dude should really be like making music for video games. Just a genius composer.
Wow.
And he uses everything in BandLab. Just no sounds imported, no samples. He's just messing with the BandLab plugins and sounds and creating just masterpiece, like his own style of electronic like music. And so yeah, it's really about the artist.
Yeah, it really is. It's inspiring, and
Yeah,
we'll see it time and time again where something new comes out or something lesser or looked upon, and someone's going to create the most brilliant, beautiful piece of art using it.
exactly. And
And
sometimes it's
yeah,
dope to use something that is has less um I guess features or whatever
yeah,
because it challenges you. And so one thing I mainly use a lot of different DAWs because I teach. So it's like sometimes I might get
mm,
a student who only uses BandLab or FL or whatever. So I try to stay
hmm,
up on whatever's latest. Sometimes I do wish like I could just go back to just using something really simple because
yeah,
when I feel like when I was doing that, it was like I would push myself. So I
yeah,
usually make a lot of beats on this Poly tracker because it's like it's mono, so you have to like do all your chords on different tracks, and
mm,
it's very limited, but it's so fun. Or like Koala
yeah,
app on my iPad,
yeah,
because it's just like I feel like it forces me to think outside of the box, and then when I get into
mm,
because I was using Logic for a while, and I love Logic, but the reason I stopped using it is because I feel like it's so easy to
hmm,
make a beat in it now for me. Where I'm like, and I know it's kind of crazy. A lot of people are like, why do you want to make music more challenging? This shouldn't
mm,
be about like just making good music. Why do you have to? For me, it's like about. I feel like art is about um pushing yourself or like to expressing yourself through some type of like I don't know to pull or like struggle. Where it's
mm,
like that's how my first interaction with art was like okay, a big part of it was trying to see what I could do. Like okay, I want to make this, but I only have this. So how
yeah,
can I? That's art. That's when
yeah,
you watch like Michelangelo or somebody, they sculpt like this amazing thing out of stone. You're like, how did they do that? It's
mm,
like, and that's the art of it to me. Is like, okay, here's somebody who that's to me that's entertaining.
yeah,
And I feel like a lot of my disconnect sometimes with modern music, even though I like a lot of modern artists, is I feel like so many people have this idea of like, um, they don't want it to be any kind of difficult at all.
yeah,
And I think the problem with that is like you're gonna start to see less and less people be impressed with it or care about it. And that's what we started to see with hip hop, where it's just
mm,
like people weren't going to shows no more. The sales for like the top artists for like their shows were declining.
yeah,
And so I feel like what Kendrick is doing now is really kind of rejuvenated hip hop in a way, where it's like a lot of, and I see it as a music teacher. I literally see the change since the whole beef with Drake started, like in students, where a lot of kids would come in and all they wanted to do was like rap about whatever, killing, shooting, or drill, whatever, and it's just like punching in. This year, I got so
mm,
many kids that are like really taking their time writing, really taking their time when it comes to making their beats, and like um going back and like digging up samples where like people would get records and then like sampling off vinyl again. And it's kind of like it hasn't been like that. It literally has. I've been there at AMP for a couple of years now, and this is the first time I've seen this many students like wanting to be creative in this way. So I feel like yeah, it shouldn't be like you shouldn't make gatekeep in a way of like, oh, they're not talented enough to do this or whatever. But I feel like that is an enjoyable part of the whole like aspect of being an artist is okay, there's some barrier of entry to where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
you actually care about this. You know, that's I think for me, the important thing is like you should care about it. Like we shouldn't have all these people who don't actually care about it. They just kind of care about what it might get you, you
Care about
know?
the result. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't actually enjoy like what they're doing or
Mm-hmm.
love it, you know?
Yeah.
If it didn't make money, they wouldn't do it. And I'm like, I'm seeing kids now who are like, they don't have no plans of being a star. They're probably going to be a dentist,
Mm-hmm.
but they just love making music because it's
Yeah.
fun and it's enjoyable and they like seeing
Mhm.
what they can come up with. So that's what I'm about. You
Yeah.
know, that's kind of what
Absolutely.
made me love hip hop and music. So I've been like really, I feel like my interest in music has been rejuvenated like this year, just because I feel like there's that love for like, and not just hip hop, just music and art in
Mm-hmm.
general. I feel like that's been the pushback against like AI. It's like people are like, you know what? We caused this.
Yeah.
It's like we kind of like paved the way for AI by making everything easier and easier and easier and not caring
Mm-hmm.
about art. To where yeah, AI can get you some pretty impressive results, but like I think a lot of people are like, even if that AI picture looks great, I still don't like it
Yeah.
because what the fuck is that? You know, like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like um, you know, it's not beneficial for us at all if this is going to replace what we do.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. That I agree. I think limitations breed creativity, and in your
facts,
software or whatever that you do when you're first starting out, and just being able to there is a magic that's taken away when it's like oh, it'll do it for you, or you don't have to worry
facts.
about that, or yeah, just like, how do I record? Oh, you just do it and you can fix it later, it'll sound fine. Like those, that
Yeah.
kind of ideology kind of takes away from it. And like I saw it as well. It was really it felt like I was like in a moment in history. Like it really felt real when I was recording, and this happened twice. But I was recording with somebody,
Mhm.
and then the new disc came out, and like everybody just stopped what they were doing,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
all sat down and
And
just
listen to
listened to
it.
it, and
Yeah,
everybody was quiet, like
yeah,
dead quiet,
yeah.
listening to the whole song start to finish. And as soon as it's done, everybody's like, run it back. And then we do it, and that happened twice. And like I really saw it as well with a lot of my younger artists.
Yeah,
They started like to like looking up Genius interviews, old ones too. They just like lyrics and
yeah,
bars, like they have
yeah.
new meaning, and they're able to see them from, because they see people,
Mhm,
14 seconds after a diss drops, they have like
mhm.
lyrical breakdowns of
Yeah,
every
14,
single
yeah.
one. And it's like, oh
Yeah,
my,
yeah,
and they're for the first time, for some of the young kids, that for the first time ever, they're hearing lyric breakdowns like
yeah.
really in depth, and hearing like how deep it really goes, and
Facts,
how important writing is. And
facts.
these are some of the same artists I had who just made drill music,
Mhm,
and they're able to see this whole new world and how beautiful it is.
mhm.
And they just start listening to more underground artists, and they're like, this goes infinitely deep. And it's like, I had no idea. I'm
No
so glad
idea.
that this happened.
Yeah,
Because we would lean into like, oh, this production sounds this way, or this vocal sounds this way, but how does it make you feel when you look at it under a microscope?
yeah.
And
Facts.
how deep do these layers go?
Mhm.
And just seeing the art and beauty and writing come back and be remanifested or put back into the spotlight in that way is really,
Exactly,
really
man.
beautiful. That's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what was the catalyst for you moving to Louisville in 2008, and
Mhm.
how's the city's culture influenced your music?
Yeah, I moved up here, man. I came up here a lot growing up in the church, and so I kind of had some ties here. And so I was dating a girl at the time who grew up here, and so we dated for a minute. And so we were like, okay, we're probably gonna get married. So she was either gonna move there, or I was gonna move here. I decided to move here. I was kind of tired of Florida at the time,
Mm,
and I was like, I want something different. I feel like I had seen just a lot growing up in Florida. I had seen like when I go back to visit now, I'm like, yo, I grew up in paradise. But when I growing up, I didn't notice that growing up. It
mm,
just seemed like I seen a lot of struggle. all the time growing up in Florida. And so for me, it just felt like, I don't know, it just wasn't special at all. Um, so I feel like Indiana, ironically enough, was like seemed more exciting to me, like Louisville, just moving somewhere different. And
Yeah.
so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna move to Indiana. And so I was really involved in church at the time. Like, my goal was to be a minister. And so a lot of people move to this area from all over the world actually because of the seminary here and stuff. So it's kind of ironic in a sense, like even though I didn't move here for like Baptist seminary. It was kind of like the church I grew up in. They have their kind of seminary here too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a Bible school, and so I moved up here really to like I was gonna be a minister. That was really my plan. It was like to me, hip hop was like a. Um, I love music and I love hip hop, but in a lot of ways, I always felt this contention as far as like there was a lot of aspects of hip hop, and I still feel that way. There was a lot of aspects of hip hop that I felt were a problem and that I felt was evil. And so it was always this thing of like, I need to sacrifice hip hop, you know what I'm saying, to please God. So part of my reason for moving here was to be like, okay, let me dedicate my life to God and like um, maybe put music on the back burner. And so ironically, when I moved here, I kind of had a change in a lot of ways. I was coming of age. I was 22 and I just saw things differently as I grew older. And so music became a lot more um, like impactful in my life. And I got actually more into music than I did into like being a minister. I kind of like got away from that whole like plan. And so I feel like I'm still a minister in a sense. Like it's like hip hop is kind of like my religion.
Yeah.
Like
I love
music
that.
is kind of like, how I express my relationship with God, you
Mm.
know? So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
That is really cool. I remember as a kid, if it's the seminary off of like Grinstead or that
Yeah, I
area,
think
like
that's yeah, yeah.
I used to play there as a kid a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah.
and
It's a
so
nice area
I'd
over
see,
there.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice, and so I could see, yeah, that being like a reason, like one of the reasons, like to come over here.
Hmm.
And I love the yeah, music is my religion now. You know.
Yeah, yeah, it is because I feel like a lot of people when I say that it's like an alarm for a lot of people that come from the world I'm in because they're like, oh man, because hip hop is seen as a religion by them, but like an
Mm-hmm.
evil religion in
Mm.
the sense of like, um, oh yeah, that's music is just like the devil in the Bible. There's like Satan was like given music right as his like gift, and so
Mm.
he used music to like sway people away from God, and I think like that's a problematic sort of theology and teaching because I feel like music is one of the things that makes life worth living. Art is just like without music, you take music away from life. I really feel like most people are just going to be depressed and
Yeah.
like we don't know TV, no movies, no like that's the reason why a lot of people get up is for the
Yeah.
next video game or the next artist song or whatever. Life would just be so dreary without art. Like I feel like
Yeah.
what better representation do we have of God, you
Right.
know, than art? So for me, art is like that's what makes me believe there's a God. Because I think about like chords and just how you listen to jazz and like how does that work together? It's like
Mm.
when you think about like even animals, like they don't no other animal has really evolved to like come up with as complex like as we have with like music. And it's something that they're
Mm.
trying to study and trying to figure out like why in human beings does music have this sort of like relationship with us as far as like our evolution. Like what is because it doesn't really make sense in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Um So to me, I think of it as like this sacred thing. Like art is a sacred thing. It can change the whole world. Like we see with just how like go back to the beef thing, like, just how Kendrick has like shifted the entire rap culture in like what 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
You know, shifted the way people think
Mm.
about just music. And I imagine if we could do that we can use what Kendrick is doing somebody like that speaking on Israel or speaking on other issues like world hunger. And you wonder why that type of hip hop gets suppressed because it is powerful. It's like
Mm.
people using art and music in that way to like create real change in the world. Like, to me, that's what I'm about. And that's kind of what I've always been about. What made me love music in the first place was I seen, like, growing up listening to Outkast, for me, it was it was so impactful for me because I see myself in Andre and Big Boy. Whereas like, but I was the only Andre and Big Boy in my neighborhood. It was like everybody else was on Hot Boy shit. You know what I'm saying? And I was the only one, but they gave me the courage to be myself. Just by them being themselves and having the message that they had, it was like, okay, I can go against the grain. I can be outcast, you know, and have something different to say. And art is the only way we can do that because you can't shut something like that out. Like these, like a lot of times people say, well, or you might think, well, this artist got into this position. Like even with Kendrick, a lot of people feel like, and I've had some suspicions myself, like maybe Kendrick is being backed by some other people that don't like Drake, right? Because I mean that's a possibility. There's some other like corporate interests who like want to take Drake down because he's gotten too big for his pants or what have you. Which I'm sure is something like that's going on. But because here's the thing, because Kendrick is so influential as an artist that he could do that without corporate interests because that's how powerful art is. So you have a art people, somebody who, and that's why you can't really force. Like I tell people this as well all the time. Like people say we talk about like some people have called Jack Harlow a plant, right? An industry plant. That whole concept to me is invalid in the ways most of the time people use it, mainly because you can't really force something like art. Like, yeah, you can give some money or whatever, but if that's the case, all Puff Daddy's kids would be the most famous artists in the world. Like, what's his name? Will Smith's son would be, you know what I'm saying? Like, the most famous rapper, the best rapper. And it's like, but you can't really force something. So I feel like Drake, in a way, he's earned where he is because he's talented. He makes great music, but there is something going on with the way he's gone about it, you know, and to where it's like when it comes to the influence he's had, there's some manipulation that's been had. You can't discredit his work as far as like, okay, yeah, he's made some hit music. He's a great songwriter, you know, but it's like when it comes to ghostwriting and other things like that, yes, somebody can use somebody else's talent and put their face on it, right? And you can manipulate people in that way, but you still have to have enough of your own talent to do that. So that's why somebody like Drake is dangerous because usually when somebody's that talented, they're pretty pure in their artistic. Like you see, like the last person was like Kanye, right? Like Kanye, really talented, influential, but he was a pure artist. He was like, I'm going to give you art. Drake has the same level of talent, but he's just like, you know what? I kind of don't care about art. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine if Michael Jackson was just like, I'm going to make the most like least common denominator cookie cutter ass music I possibly can to make sales. And he's talented enough where he can do that for 50 years and nobody could stop him because he's just that talented. And I feel like Drake is like that in a way to where he's talented enough to where, but imagine if Drake actually cared about the music he put out. And not to say he's got to be like Kendrick and have this like, you know, these messages or be spiritual or anything like that. But he hasn't really put out an album, in my opinion, that really pushes the envelope of like what he can do with his talent. And I think that's what Kendrick was speaking to when he's like, you don't have any classics. And I feel like Drake does have some classic stuff, but I understood where he was coming from in a sense where it's like, yo, you haven't really pushed yourself as an artist. And as a result, the whole rap game is mediocre.
Lowered the bar.
The bar has been lowered because the top rapper in the game doesn't really push himself, doesn't have anything to say, is just coasting on his fame, and he doesn't care. And we're not trying to say Drake's not good. It's Kendrick. You can't deny that. Kendrick even said, like, hey, man, I like Drake with the melodies. I don't like Drake when he's acting tough. It's like you're being something you're not, to just to go with whatever the industry is going to make it. You care about something else a little bit more than art. And what is it that you really, what's your real agenda here? Because it seems like your agenda might be problematic. You might have an agenda that doesn't line up with what's good for the culture.
Mm.
And so maybe it's you got some child, exploitation ring or something. I don't know. But it seems like there's something else going on here that you care more about than and I feel like when you're at that level that Drake is on and being a star gets you access to certain things, that's a possibility where he's just like, hey, I'm just creating this music or whatever so I can be famous and rich so I can have control and power to do whatever I want. And that can be something that becomes your agenda over being a great artist.
Becomes a part of your legacy
Yeah.
as well. And that I think some artists are some artists are way more concerned with legacy more than others. And you can see Drake putting out songs like 2C Slide is like, what is that going to do for your legacy?
Right.
Whereas Prince is like, I have 800 songs that'll never see the light of day, and I'm going to write it into my will that they'll never see the light of day because I don't think they're good enough. I don't want you to come out with a posthumous album of like 100 of songs that I didn't think were ready or right when I was still here, because that's part of my legacy. Because as soon as the Prince album drops, the posthumous one, that's a part of his legacy. But that's outside his control. So he tried to absolutely make sure that stuff doesn't come out of the vault, or you got to wait like 100 years for the record label to literally to release it. And by that time, people know that he didn't want that to come out.
Yeah.
That's gonna, we're gonna get those Prince tracks eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
But we know as the audience now in our hearts, like, where his head was at, where his mind is at. We're curious, but we know
we know what that man had to say.
Right. Whereas I feel like we could, look at Drake, and if he hasn't put something out in a while, he could find something on a hard drive and just put it out.
Yeah.
And
like,
be
hey guys,
that's good. Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like I don't really have any problem with that, other than the fact that, as you say, like, does he even have like a conviction behind this or anything?
Right.
And that's, to me, is the main issue. Is like, are you Walt Disney? You know what I'm saying? Are you who's like are you making Transformers movies for like just to like make money for the underwriters, or do you actually have something to say with your art? Are you actually really trying to because the problem is, and here's the thing, a lot of people feel like, oh, y'all just hate party music, y'all hate dancing, so on and so forth, or y'all hate having fun. Like, it's just art, it's just music, just enjoy it. This is the problem. The problem is, as we talked about AI before, the problem is if we don't have some type of like connection with our art beyond just it being entertainment, then anybody or anything could make it. And it's like, then there's no point in us creating art at that point. Because if a computer, if it's just about entertainment and having fun, then a computer can replace. We can use AI we don't need actual human beings to do it. What makes art special is the human side of it, to know each other, to understand each other. Why are we here on Earth? Like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to take care of people? How should we be organizing for this or that or whatever? Like, you have to tie our art into like our struggle or our goals as human beings and what we're trying to do. Because devoid of that is anti-human. It's just like not. It's like it's pointless. It's a lot of people don't like to tie, I guess, politics or philosophy to art, but you can't. It's like you do have something to say. Drake has something to say with his music. It's most of his fans just don't allow themselves to be sophisticated enough thinkers to actually come to grips with what that message is. But he definitely has a message in his music. And Kendrick has clocked his T. It's like, hey man, when he says you lied about your religious views, it's like, yeah, Drake will have a song like God's Plan. Okay, what is God's plan then, Drake? You know what I'm saying? It's like, is God's plan for you to be like on a boat with Millie Bobby Brown? It's like, is that like, what are you saying here? Are you using a religious sort of, I guess, religious sayings, whatever, to add some type of weight to your vapid message, to make people feel like this is deeper than it is, but really it's empty. You don't have anything to say. Like, you don't really believe in any type of God's plan. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, people don't have to be religious, whatever, to make valuable art,
Mhm.
but don't pretend, you know what I'm saying? Like don't um like play with people's like who like you're utilizing that whole the gospel or whatever upbringing that people might have or their affinity for that to like make them feel like, hey, this is adjacent to this when really it's
Right.
not, you know.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like it gets into, okay, it's manipulative territory right now.
Right.
It's not authentic.
Taking just this piece of something this market appreciates,
Yeah,
and then just taking that and then making it a part of your own music just to reach that audience seems it
it's
comes off as
appropriation. Yeah.
disingenuous. It's
Yeah,
appropriation.
right.
Yeah. Taking yeah, it's like I'm gonna do a gospel song
Hmm.
because I feel like this is like because
Exactly.
I like this. And I like this piece of it. I don't want it to become a part of me, but I just want to reach that audience and just kind of get that
And get
market
that
and then
market.
and then
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something that, and to me, I pick up on that because like I grew up in that, and so people naturally associate me with gospel music. So a lot of times people be like, "Oh, you hate the church." You know, church people have a problem with me big time. It's like, "Oh, you hate the church. You always criticizing the Bible," and I do that so you all can know where I stand. I'm not here to try to criticize just to make people feel bad. I'm just like I do not want to uh be perceived as something I'm not and therefore reap benefits that I don't deserve. You know, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, if I wanted to, sure I could be a gospel rapper. And you know, I had a pretty clear path in that world to be successful in gospel rap. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But it would be disingenuous of me because I did not fully believe in everything that they believed. And so that's when I made my exit because I wanted to be genuine as far as like this is how I see it. And I know people who see it my way that continue down that path because it was like that's their livelihood. So like my livelihood suffered because it was like, yeah, like even in outside of gospel music, people associated me with that. So it was just like, oh, you're not one of us because you come from that world. And there's been
Mhm.
a lot of progress made since then. You know, we saw Kanye, Chance the Rapper. It's like a lot of people started having more of like kind of coming to some type of understanding of like that tension between the church and the world, so to speak, and being able to address that in music. But before them, that just sounded awkward. It's like when you just made sort of gospels type music, um, outside of the church, both sides rejected it. It was like,
Yeah.
what is this? This is weird. But it's like, yeah, you seen Chance the Rapper come out, Kanye dropped, I think it was Life of Pablo, or um, I forget where he started to really. Kanye's always done that, but it was
Mhm.
like he started going. He's actually become a Christian like um recently, a
Yeah.
couple years ago, and so I
That
think a lot
Donda
more
record
people.
was like
Yeah,
just yeah.
exactly. So a lot more people were like, oh, okay, like more, and that's the power of art. Like literally 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was corny. It was corny to be like, I'm gonna get a gospel choir and sing about Jesus on a track. Even though Kanye came out with Jesus Walks, that wasn't really that song. It was
Yeah.
more like, now this is actually a gospel song, you know, not
Mhm.
questioning God. We're fully embracing the concept of Jesus Christ being God on a song that's being played in a club or whatever. That's 15 years ago. Never would have, nobody ever would have thought that would happen.
Yeah.
But that's the power of art to where you can address something like that. And for me, somebody who kind of came up in both worlds, like I came up in the hood, experienced secular culture, came up equally in a church, experiencing like really devout religious culture. I've always wanted to address that in my music, but it's like there's never really been a huge audience for that. Like that tension, it just made people more kind of like uneasy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I feel like my art has kind of, so the people I've connected with, like you and other people who've like understood my music, has always been special to me. Cause I'm like, there's something special about you because most people don't get this.
Mhm.
Most people don't understand where I'm coming from with this music, what I'm trying to say. So I feel like, but seeing somebody like Kendrick who brings up religion in his music and other concepts that aren't mainstream, it's very important to me because I feel like, and other kids, because it's like everybody is like, I don't even think my story is that unique. I feel like most
Mhm.
people go through stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's just that most people don't feel like the stories deserved to be spotlighted. It's like, oh, you got to be a thug from the hood to be a rapper, or you got to be this, or you got to be that. It was like we had these certain archetypes that we felt like these are the only stories worthy of telling. So most people felt like their story, who they were, wasn't valid enough, and that's why you have so many people who are content with hiding who they are, or like not really um being completely honest about their real convictions, how they really feel. Like I was like, so many people sit in church every Sunday who really don't really believe it, But it's like, what else like what else am I gonna do? Like I've been here for 10 years.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah, it becomes tradition or habit more than like genuinely a part of what you
yeah,
believe. And you're just like, I've done it for so long. Why would it feels wrong not doing it,
yeah. It's like, who am I?
but
Like
you lose the meaning.
I'm a joke if I you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
Like I show up somewhere else on a Sunday outside of the church, people are like, what are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like, you're this, so you fit here. It's just out. I feel like it's just an offshoot of just capitalism, where we just kind of like, we need people to put in different categories, and
Right.
people can't really be fluid and be. That's how we are fluid. We literally are energy.
Yeah.
And we to not allow people to be fluid and be like, okay, yeah, today I saw this and got this information, and it convinced me this way. Oh, but here's some new information that conflicts with this. But a lot of people stop me like, yo, I can't, because I have this job here that is completely dependent upon me accepting this information as the truth. So if I want to keep my livelihood, I need to ignore this completely. And so that affects our politics, everything.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I feel like the world would be a better place if we allowed people to just be as fluid as we actually are, you know?
Yeah. A more accurate representation of what
Hmm.
it's like being a human. We try to avoid the truth of what it's like to actually be human, like by
Hmm.
by pretending this and this and this, or putting these structures around it,
Yeah.
just kind of pretend like it's not really what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand. I understand too the other side, as far as like a lot of people feel like that'd be chaos, or we do need some guidelines as far as living. And I agree. But I think we have to come to that honestly. Like
Hmm.
we do need to, like, I feel like in a lot of ways the Bible is convincing when it comes to, okay, structuring a society, or like even discipline as a father. Like when you come to raising up your kids, it's like you want to tell them right and wrong. So you need some absolute truth to do that. It's
Hmm.
like a lot of things that I feel atheists or whoever don't understand is they think they have a moral outline a lot of times, but really they just came up with that in their head. There's no
Hmm.
absolute. And to come up with something absolute, you do kind of have to be religious to like say this is the absolute truth. Like even the golden rule, it's really like it's a philosophical sort of presupposition, where you're establishing something as absolute truth. This is the universe has a moral code. It's kind of a religious view, to say that, okay, if I like were to punch you in the face right now, that is wrong to do that. I have to have some type of established moral guideline that's based on some agreed upon thing
Hmm.
between other people and myself. So, but I feel like we can get there, but we gotta come there honestly. We can't
Yeah.
say, well, it's wrong to slap him in the face because,
Hmm.
that's what God said is wrong. Say,
Yeah.
okay, well now we got more questions about like who God is, and let's talk
Yeah.
about it. Let's really honestly figure this out.
Mhm.
And a lot of people just don't like going there. They just kind of, because it's work.
It is. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. People just like to say, well, this is just what I believe because my mom believed it,
Hmm.
and we're gonna move on next. I don't have time. It's like I
Hmm.
don't even have time to. I got to go to work. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? I got, you know, spaghetti, whatever, bacon in the oven. I'm trying to watch my show because I got to get up tomorrow and go to work. I don't want to argue with you about the nature of God or the universe.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, if we can fix certain problems first to where we can like, okay, now we can discuss why we in this like weird situation called life, like what's going
Hmm.
on here. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but we just haven't been. We've just really been like just. I feel like society has just been going through just turmoil and chaos to where we're not even at ground zero
Mm-hmm.
where we should be with figuring out life.
Yeah.
We're like way down here somewhere, just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Even with our technology, we're still in the stone ages of just like killing each other and trying to like find some joy in life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think art is important to getting there to where we can start figuring out more important questions, or at least being able to ask those questions.
Agreed. And you remind me of like how this goes to just the most fundamental aspects of our lives, and have we set up everything that we do, like a separation of church and state. That's People make policy based on their religious beliefs,
Exactly.
but they say there's still a separation there. So yeah, going towards like a future where we can be more honest about how we actually
Yeah,
operate as human beings is the
that would
next
be.
step to the truth and to freedom,
I agree, man.
philosophically as well.
I agree, 100%.
So, as an instructor at AMPT, what are the most important lessons you aim to teach your students?
Man, that's a good question. AMP has a mission statement. I feel bad because I'm struggling to remember it exactly, but mine is kind of similar. It's like you want to give kids a space to like just be themselves, like be creative in the ways that they are. So for me, what's important is finding out if somebody's interested in music production, finding out what songs, what artists like inspired them. That's a really important question. Like what made you like music? Like
Hmm.
what did you listen to? That way I can approach how to teach you, because I don't think you can really teach something like music one way, because there's so many different styles and genres or whatever. It's like if you have a kid who um grew up in jazz, like their dad was listening to Coltrane and Miles Davis, and you say, "Oh, we're gonna start with country guitar." They just might not be interested in it anymore because it's just not.
Hmm.
They might get to country later, but it's like what made them want to do music, how they hear music. You can spend an eternity in jazz. You can spend an
Yeah.
eternity in hip hop. It's people who just listen to boom bap. You know what I mean? That's music to them.
Mhm.
So in India, there's people that just listen to their music.
Mhm.
So you really got to find out what has interested this person to become an artist and help them to find their voice. Because something that I find myself having to do less is like not doing things for kids. Because I'll be here, they'll make a beat, and I'm like, oh man, this is actually crazy. Let me do this.
Mhm.
And it's like even I'm writing a song with some kids now, and I try to like give them some ideas, but I'm like, no, don't use what I just did. That's just an example. And they're like, but that's so good. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, but we're not gonna use that.
Mm.
I want you to see how I got there so you can do it yourself. That's just my way of doing things. And I do think there are certain standards. Obviously, you got music theory. There's certain different schools of thought when it comes to how to write a song. So you can go to
Mm.
YouTube and find like Grammy winning songwriters who have a formula, which a lot of them are good. But I really try to say, hey, take all this information in, soak it in, but you gotta find your voice. Because you might be doing something that breaks all the rules.
Mhm.
Um, it's good to know the rules, then you can break them. So yeah, I feel like having giving kids a space to be themselves, and like especially where we are in the Greenwood Avenue over in the West, it's like a lot of the kids in that area, I feel like don't get the opportunity to be themselves. There's a lot of peer pressure to be what the neighborhood might want you to be, what
Mhm.
you might see others do. So we do have a lot of kids who come in from that neighborhood who might feel pressure to record, street music or whatever. But some of these kids might be, they might want to do something else. Or maybe all of them secretly might want to do something. Everybody likes Michael Jackson. Everybody,
Mhm.
you can't play Whitney Houston and not feel something. So it's like, um, why don't you feel like that's something that you personally can be involved with creating?
Mhm.
Why do you feel like you have to be this kind of very narrow, um, thing because that's also short lived. Like most of these street hood rappers, they don't live very long, or their music life shelf life isn't very long.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you want to be something that effectively dies in your mid 20s? You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think a lot of them don't see life beyond that. They don't see life beyond their mid 20s. So just opening the broadening the spectrum to be like, hey, here's Freddie Mercury at Live Aid in 1985. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't you think that's amazing, right? You know, and I feel like that broadens their horizons a little bit. Like, oh, um, I can appreciate this as a black kid from the West End. Um, and I've seen that happen. So I'm trying to do more of that. Maybe take them on trips more, like get them in different. Dave does a good job with that. Just kind of getting kids in different environments, introducing them to other cultures and other ways of looking at things. So I would like to expand that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of been like my approach.
Yeah, it reminds me of just the archaic way we used to teach kids. It's like it was, oh, you like music, or I want you to make music. You're learning the piano.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah.
that felt like that was just like the way that parents like
Hmm.
just like taught kids, or like would just put them in that avenue. It's like, oh, you like music in general, this huge infinite thing.
Yeah.
We'll just make you learn piano. And oftentimes the kids are like their friends are outside playing, and then
And I don't
they're
want to play
learning
piano.
like
Yeah.
they're learning chords, they're learning their scales on piano. Like, I hate this, and thus
Hmm.
I must hate
I
music.
must say music.
And so they don't learn until like later, like in their 20s, like, I still love music. It was just that stupid piano
Yeah,
that I had to
yeah.
tick away at as a kid that made me
Yeah,
hate it. And so it's all about
yeah.
how yeah, because yeah, you can
Hmm.
change the trajectory of someone's life if you're like, yeah, their father listened to jazz, but then you make them, listen to country music, or like
Hmm.
learn like, yeah, just classical piano, and that's not what they want to do. It's like,
Yeah,
but the old archaic vision was like it just all falls under music, but
exactly.
it's so much more fluid than that.
Yeah.
Uh, so how do you stay inspired yourself and keep learning and improving your own skills as somebody who's a creator themselves, but also a teacher?
Yeah.
Because I definitely I think we see it so often as we come to a place or a template or a way that we create something that we can fall into, of like, this is safe, and it's like the easiest trap we all fall into,
Yeah.
stagnant, being stagnant. And
Yeah.
so how do you keep yourself inspired to keep learning new things and be like, oh, what is that, like, oh,
Hmm.
like without going overboard?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the most valuable things you taught me when I went over to your place and started asking you, like, you're like, Chris, I spent so much money on
Yeah.
plugins.
Yeah. Exactly.
Learn your stocks. Just learn
Exactly.
stock plugins. Pretend they don't exist, because you're going to get Instagram ads say this is going to change everything.
Facts.
And
Yeah.
just learn how your stock plugins work, and then you'll eventually be like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you'll find like a barrier or a wall,
Hmm.
and you're like a hard obstacle, and you're like, I do need this tool to navigate this obstacle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you define those lines, and how do you
Man.
keep yourself inspired to keep learning like that?
And I'm not perfect at it, man. Like it's still something I'm like, I'm not struggling with it like I used to, but it's something I definitely, find myself having some tension, with. So I think for me, man, it's like I like to, because I see it as two, questions in a sense. I was answer like the artist side where I feel like I like to reinvent myself a lot of times. I feel like whenever I'm feeling stagnant or like I don't want to do the same thing twice. And that's tough because there's a benefit from doing the same thing twice. There's a benefit from being consistent. So you have to balance, like, I have to find a balance between, and that's something I'm still working out, find a balance between wanting that sort of staying fresh thing, but also like knowing that there is an aspect of art that is about a repetition. When you get into the business side of art, and the business side isn't this thing that like is counter to being an artist. I think they work together because once you become an artist and you want to share your music, yeah, you do have to like duplicate that performance or that song or whatever for different audiences and to go on tour or whatever to make an album or whatever or to have a fan base. It's like it is based on repetition to where it's like, okay, And repetition can be good, as you know, being a practicing musician. It's like that's how you develop your chops. Is doing the same thing over. So Casey is actually somebody who um inspires me a lot because he's very like um active when it comes to like you could probably find a Casey show almost every week. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like he'll give you the same lineup each time, or he might throw something new in, but he does that so that he can build up. He makes that better. So finding the newness in the same, a lot of times is great. Where it's just like, okay, yeah, this is the same song, but we did it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And each time it's a little better. I'm a little faster on. I might can throw another note in this lick now. You know what I'm saying? Whereas before I couldn't quite. It wasn't clean enough. But
Yeah.
now I'm like through repetition, slight variation. So I think for me, instead of like just trying to completely reinvent the wheel, which is kind of what I do a lot of times as an artist, and you can see that as like I changed my name so many times, or like I changed how I what I want to do as art. Like as far as like now, I'm doing more of like live producing and sort of, you jump in between. When you do a lot of different things, it's like it can that can be a problem too. Like
Mhm.
so, I tell a lot of artists be versatile, but it's good to find that thing. And I think I'm glad I did that early on, and I was just a rapper because it's like that's what I'm best at. I feel, and I always feel confident rapping because I'm just like, okay, I know as a rapper, I feel like I can compete with anybody. You know what I'm saying? As a rapper, when
Mhm.
it comes to being a producer or musician, it's like, okay, Kalen Ellis is actually like insane. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Mhm.
know if I can get with this dude. The count is like he's on another level. But
Mhm.
as a rapper, I feel like, hey man, you put me on a song with Kendrick, I think I can hold my own. You know what I'm saying? As a rapper, because I spent the first 10 years rapping, just rapping. So I say like finding that thing that you do the best is important and like locking in on that. But it's good to get out and diversify, especially nowadays with technology and you never know what you might have to get into to make money as an artist. It's like you're doing a podcast, you're engineering. When I met you, you were playing guitar, and
Mhm.
I think I had you play bass on the song. So I feel like being a Renaissance man or woman, is important nowadays because we do kind of have to have ownership. You do kind of have to like be able to maybe not do it all, but do a lot of different things. And that's why I feel like technology comes in where we can use technology to our advantage, not as a crutch, but as a way to pivot, in ways we need to like to where your artistic skill can like um I guess you can take the artistic skill you have in this area and apply it here as well a lot more easily
Mhm.
because I feel like a lot of things are translatable when it comes to artistic gifts. Like I find myself when I pick up a camera, even though I'm not as skilled as like people who've been doing it for years, I find myself being able to get to a good place with it a lot quicker just because I have an artistic sensibility from doing music for so long
Mhm.
to where I know what a good shot might look like or I know what um any like I know what like how to get an emotion that I want from something in a different arena.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you a good reference, like being able to having completely deep dived into one aspect of something shows you how deep the pool is in all the other
Yeah,
aspects.
yeah.
Where it can seem like the water's only this deep, but
Hmm.
you know that that's just an illusion.
Yeah,
You know,
like hey, this
it's not really like that. Yeah,
yeah,
there's an
it's like
ocean out
okay, this
there.
is my limit, but
Right.
and that way you know when you got to take it to someone else who's that's their thing. Like I
Hmm.
know how to shoot a video, but I know if I want to get these results, that when you take your thing to that person, you know what to tell them because that's important too.
Hmm.
It's like sometimes you go to somebody who knows how to do something really great, but if you don't know the language of it, it's hard to convey that. So they might not get you what you want, even though they're great at it. It's hard for them to see your vision. So yeah, it's
I see that relationship a lot with mastering engineers. They seem
Yeah.
to be the one that they get this. They're the final,
Mhm.
bastion before like it gets sent out, and people,
Mhm.
you pour your heart. You have musicians flying from all over the world who are good at their thing, and
Yeah.
you put everything you got into it, and
Yeah.
but at that end of the day, most of the time, like you hand it off to a mastering engineer because like
Yeah.
they are
Mhm.
really into that. Like mastering is their whole world,
Exactly.
and you appreciate that. You realize that I haven't dedicated the last 20 years of my life to
Some
just the
mastering.
mastering
Yeah.
process, but you have, and there is like a relief knowing like someone's like that deep in the
Yeah,
ocean,
they're gonna take care of it for you. Yeah.
and they're gonna take
They're gonna
care of
see
it.
what you missed. And
Right, exactly,
yeah.
and then to learn from that, be like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I
Yeah.
would have never thought to do that," because especially when you get wrapped in a project for so long, you
Yeah.
you
You
start
overlook.
getting blinders on, you start things that are right in front of you start to blur, like, things get blurry,
Yeah.
and I think that happens with ear fatigue and just, like, hearing the same sound over and over again, like, a certain frequency might stand out to somebody else as, like, harsh, like, is just that's
Mhm.
a fundamental building block of this for
Exactly.
you, and
Yeah.
so it is so important at the end of the day, just, like, no one, person is an island, and one person especially in that process, it is
Mhm.
so good to have other ears
Yeah.
to be involved in it.
Facts.
So, how has your philosophy on music and life evolved over the years up to this moment?
Man, quite a bit, man. Like I said, I grew up and I was kind of, more influenced by religion as far as like in the Christian hip hop. And then when I stopped doing Christian hip hop, I think being online, a lot of people feel different ways about online and the whole discourse that happens online. But I feel like I don't really have as negative a view about online discourse because for me it was very important with like me developing my thoughts. Just getting online and talking with different people over the years um helped to develop like how I see things. I learned a lot about like I used to be somebody that felt like all like hood music was bad or whatever. Like if, you know, Lil Wayne or whoever, it was like if he was rapping about killing somebody or whatever, it was like no redeemable quality to that at all.
Mm,
And I kind of saw at one point all secular music is bad. There was a point where I felt like everybody should be well, Christian rap should be the thing, right? And so but listening to other people and getting like um I guess debates or whatever. I think it takes a lot of humility to like really come to the place that I've come to because I've really been like I've really broken my whole like concept of who I am and what I think down so many times and into many like different pieces and built it back together. When it comes to how I view art, how I view music. Because yeah, I mean, if you were to see posts I made 10 years ago, it would be kind of like completely different from how I see things now. And I think for me, it has been like having a dialogue with people and actually listening to people. So even now, even people that probably agree with who I like, the person I used to be, I would listen to them and see like, okay, like, I see where you're coming from. They might feel a certain way about, like I had a conversation recently with somebody about Kendrick who feels like Kendrick is promoting, um, like the New World Order. Or I can't exactly remember what they felt like he was promoting. But basically something evil. Like he's just not a real Christian because he's talking about this, and then they were upset about. I think he, his aunt being gay on the album or like being trans. I can't remember exactly what the context was, but they were kind of like just saying, "Oh, he's not a believer because of this, what he's saying here." And I think for me, it would have been easier for me to be like, oh, okay, that's a bigoted view, blah, blah, blah. But then, you know, Kendrick does kind of delve into that whole Christian world a bit to where that can be, he might have seemed to support that type of view before in his music. And um, so there's a larger, opens up larger questions of like, how do we um, wrestle with this and having grace with people who might be misinformed about things because everybody is just trying to. A lot of these people are trying to earnestly just like live out their convictions, and so for me, it was more of like my search for truth came from a place of like, okay, I don't have the convictions I used to have. So that allowed me to expand my understanding of things to where that allowed me to grow and be more open to like different expressions. You know, I used to be against mumble rap and all these Lil Yachty when he first came out, oh, he's trash. You know, it's just like, but now I've evolved to where I'm like, I understand these different expressions and I see how they all can work together. My issue is more so what's going to be the dominant expression and how we can we balance it to where um, certain things don't get exploited because they might be more marketable or um, easily kind of hijacked or whatever. And that's my thing now versus like just being dismissive um, about things. Just like how we have to be able to analyze everything on a case by case basis and give each everything the weight it deserves because there's people involved. If you dismiss whole like cultures and there's people you're dismissing and the way they think and how they how they live their life, and so you're not going to be heard doing that, and they're not going to be heard, so it's just going to create this dehumanization, and that's really what happens when you dismiss. Like that's when people are like, oh, hip hop is this, or I hate country music, or I hate this, and it's just like it's kind of dehumanizing because it's like this is people's entire like expression of who they are and how they feel about the world. So when you say Gunna's music is like completely trash or like drill music is this, and it's just like, well, this is their entire world. Is there something? Because we go to high schools and we analyze music with kids at Minor Daniels Academy, which is a pretty rough school, man. Minor Daniels. It's like a lot of the kids who get in trouble, they go there. As sort of a correction school. So it kind of, when you walk in there, it looks like a jail. There's all the doors are locked and they got these guards and stuff. So, but the kids in these schools, we asked them, hey, play us your favorite song. And it's been eye-opening for me because I'm not a big fan of NBA YoungBoy. It's like I could probably listen to one NBA YoungBoy song a year, like on my personal, enjoyment. But like that's all they would play is NBA YoungBoy, and his songs just sounded all the same to me. But what I realized is he does say some pretty like emotional stuff. He does have a lot to say, and it may seem like he's repeating himself. He's saying the same thing over and over and over, but it's just like these kids are getting something different from each song. Because they'll play 10 songs. I'm like, was that not the same song? But no, they're getting something different from each song. There's something like, he might be talking about a certain, I guess, charge he got in this song. In other song, he might be talking about a friend betrayed him or whatever. So we started pointing out in the songs, Dre from producing the Kind Generation, he had this amazing like kind of curriculum where we just kind of have themes on the board where we say, hey, violence or maybe misogyny or whatever. We start pointing out themes. So it was like, okay, bring up what's your favorite line in a song, and they'll tell us their line and we discuss it. Like, what does this fall under? Like, what is the theme to this? And it allows them to like speak on something in their lives. So you hear a lot of these kids are relating to this because it's what they're going through in their lives. So like, yeah, my cousin got shot and my uncle and me was fighting or whatever. And it's just like, that's why they connect with this music because he's speaking to their experience. And so to be dismissive is like short-sighted because there's a reason why he's so popular. There's a reason why he's the number one artist on YouTube, because his music is resonating with the kids. And so if you have a problem with the music, you probably need to go and see what the situation is and how maybe the situation needs to be fixed. Because that's what they're speaking from, There's a imbalance and socioeconomic disparity that's causing these people to maybe have what we perceive as a narrow understanding of the world. And so it sounds very like, one-dimensional to us, but unfortunately their lives are kind of one-dimensional because of you know, the socioeconomic disparities that are kind of forcing them to like have this sort of experience of pain and poverty and violence and you know dysfunction. So yeah, it's important to listen to that music and appreciate it
Mhm.
because this is these people's stories. So
Yeah, it's so true that to be dismissive or reductive of
mhm,
certain of whole genres is to be dismissive of all the people who listen to those
exactly.
genres. And it's
Facts.
like they're people from all walks of life who listen to the same genres.
Yeah,
There are people from Hidden Hills who listen to Young Boy, and people who live
exactly.
all over, and they get something different from it. And so you can't say that there's not something there. There
Right.
is a there, and there's something that people are getting from it, that they feel heard
Yep.
by listening to that music. And
Hmm.
so definitely finding like what are people hearing that they're connecting with emotionally, and just understanding that from like a place of passion
Yeah. Facts.
instead of just saying like this artist is bad and anybody listen to him just doesn't
They don't
understand.
understand music. Yeah.
Then like it's so important to realize like why that music has its place,
Yep.
and some
Facts.
people will listen to Young Boy and they get that emotional response,
Mhm.
but some people listen to Young Boy because they just want to get hyped before going to the gym.
Exactly.
And so those are two completely different
Different ways
worlds
of listening.
that
Yeah.
are both valid, and they're both getting something positive from that music. One is a
Mhm.
kid who hears like he's being heard for the first
Exactly.
time, and that person is speaking a truth that's so real to his life.
Yeah.
It feels real. And somebody's like, I just like the song because it gets me pumped so I can lift weights,
Yeah.
but two different worlds, but
Yeah.
definitely both valid ways of interpreting that
Because
music.
context matters. It's like you made me think of something. Like context for music matters so much because a lot of times we don't like a song because of the context that we're listening to it in.
Mm,
And it's like movies are a great example of that. It's like you might watch a Tarantino movie and it's a song you would never listen to, but it fits this scene so
yeah.
perfectly to where now you humming it and it's like I love this song because of this scene. And like I had a friend recently who she wasn't really grew up in church or like anything like that. But one of her favorite songs was this Lecrae and like Andy Mineo songs, like the 116 theme or whatever. It's like a very Christian song. But one of the she's like a Cincinnati Reds fan, and one of the players on the team would come out to this song, and it was like a big moment in the stadium at the time because it's like one of the best players on the team. So they knew this guy was coming out, and this is his song. So everybody loved this song,
Mm,
because of like the context of it. But it's probably a song they would have never come across or appreciated because it's like a really, really Christian like anthem song. It's about Romans 1:16. But like in that context, it was the most fire song, you know what I'm saying,
yeah.
to them. So it really is like context when it comes to music. And like even NBA Youngboy, I find myself like if I'm out somewhere at a bar or something or whatever, and it's just like everybody's got high energy or whatever. There's certain songs that I personally enjoy that I won't want to hear in that context,
Hmm.
But an NBA Youngboy song or whatever, and that's how I learned to appreciate Drake. Cause I used to hate Drake. Like when when Drake first came out, I liked him. Like I think it was the best I ever had. I love that song, and I felt like he would be the next Kanye. He had like the soulful samples, and he was rapping. But when Take Care came out, I was like, what is this, bro? This dude's singing? Like, he's not even hardly rapping. These beats are like watery and like spaced out.
Mm,
Where's the soul? I'm looking for the next college dropout. I'm looking
yeah.
for graduation. That's the hip hop that I fell in love with. And he seems to be ripping hip hop into this like, I don't know, like watered down R&B lane. And he doesn't seem to care about like really being passionate and like pushing the limits.
Mm,
It just seemed like very I don't know, like I don't know. It just seemed like, eh, you know. But when I got out into the music scene more in Louisville, like the rap scene, I started going to shows and bars. Man, it was like a Drake song comes on at the bar before the show. It was just the energy was high. It was just like everybody knew the words. And it's like, man, in that context, I started to appreciate Drake. I was like, man, he just knows how to make a banger, man. He knows how to make a song everybody can sing along with. And it's just the energy is perfect every time. It's
yeah.
like nobody did that better than Drake. So
Hmm.
that's when I started to learn to appreciate Drake. But if I was still that guy that didn't go out anywhere and I'm just at home listening to music, I would have never appreciated Drake.
Yeah, absolutely. It is wild how people will just view us like, for some people, Take Care is like the best Drake album ever,
Yeah.
but for some people it was like this falling off point, or like
Hmm.
be turning it into like rap R&B fusion in
Yeah.
a way that was uninvited at that time. But
Yeah.
for some people it's like, oh my gosh, finally, I can have this sort of like
Yeah.
lane. So it's really interesting to see how people interpret
Interpret
music in
that.
that
Yeah.
different way. So I have a lot of questions. I'm going to skip a few here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I've loved your journey in learning the bass guitar, and I'm curious of what inspired you learning the bass
Yeah,
guitar,
man.
what you enjoy the most about it, and how learning bass guitar has influenced your overall approach to music production and performance, and just
Yeah.
learning a new instrument in general.
Yeah, man. I've always wanted to play guitar. Um, I wouldn't say I gave up on playing like lead guitar, but that's a different beast. Bass is like a lot simpler, being like mostly one note at a time until you start wanting to be Thundercat or something. Then it's
Hmm.
like, okay, yeah, I gotta play some chords.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people expect the bass player to hold down the bass line. And bass lines is something that I feel like I've been good at or I enjoy doing or coming up with, just playing key bass. And so for me, picking up the bass was a little difficult at first because I'm left-handed and I had a right-handed bass, so I would play it
Mm.
upside down. But even then, I kind of were able to get a groove going, and then I switched to getting the left-handed bass, and it's been fun, man. It's having taste the way that I do, it always makes me feel like I suck because I know what my tastes are. But it is like I would say encouraging to hear back from guitar players and stuff. They're like, oh man, like you coming along nice, man, on the bass, man. They'll see a video or whatever. And a lot of this stuff is just stuff I'm like, I've been playing this lick for like the past 2 hours. So I can
Yeah.
do this like 30-second video. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like that's practice. And I feel like at some point I would be able to play. I could probably play live if the songs are pretty simple. But like my biggest influence is on the bass is James Jamerson. Like he was a
Mm-hmm.
bass player for Motown, man. It's a great documentary called I forgot the name of it, but it's about the band behind Motown, the session players. They were called their name is slipping me right now. But if you look up the documentary on the Motown musicians, it's it's a great documentary. It talks about all those great players. A lot of them didn't get uh royalties, man, like they should have,
Oh,
man. And that
session
sucks.
players had it rough for a minute.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they came up with like James Jamerson played the bass on um What's Going On, Marvin Gaye, and
Mm.
that bass line makes that song.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
It's like it's so melodic, so funky, and like Bernadette he played on. So I grew up kind of like me and my friends were big on James Jamerson, and he played with one finger, and it was like I always wanted to play the bass because of James Jamerson, man. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is incredible. I definitely want to check that out because I was learning
Yeah.
about session
The
players
Funk
like,
Brothers. That's the name of the
ah,
documentary. The
okay, I'll
Funk
check that.
Brothers. Yeah.
I was just watching something about there's a guy who like secretly recorded most of the drums for Ringo Starr.
Really?
He was like an audio engineer, and he like secretly just would like go into the
That's
he'd be
funny.
mixing it, and he'd just go into the vocal room and just like lay it down and just like played most of the Ringo Starr tracks secretly, like, and it was he was like
Wow.
he was doing an interview, and he's like, I was really gonna go to my grave with this, but like
Wow.
he said somebody else had like put it out there, and so he's like he
I
was
might as
willing to
well.
do it,
Yeah.
but he wasn't gonna tell a soul, like not even his own family. But like
Wow.
somebody got it out of him in an interview. He's like, yeah, like
That's gotta
I
be a
did like
wild
I
thing
did
to
like
hold inside.
70 of those tracks. Like I did the actual drums. I just re-recorded them because like
Because Ringo was not playing it
I've
right.
had small moments where I've done that with bands where like I'm
Yeah.
recording a band and like they've all left and I'm recording it, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, like this lick was like perfect, but there's just like this weird buzz or like just
Yeah.
small, so it just they couldn't get it just right, and it's like no one will notice if I just come in and I just like play that one part real quick,
They ain't
and
gonna know. Yeah.
I'll let them know. I'll tell them, and
Right.
they're like, oh
Right.
yeah, that's fine, don't
That's
worry
fine.
about it.
Yeah.
But like to have done it in secret for a band as big as the Beatles
That's
on
wild.
like
That's gotta be
that
tough to
many
hold that.
songs, I can't. Yeah, I just
I would
yeah,
have probably.
just
I would have
going
died
out in
holding that.
public and hearing a Beatles song and like hearing your drum riff and being like
I wonder what
having to
Ringo
not
had to
say
been thinking.
anything.
Like, man, I must have. I really went in that day.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so there is this secret life of session players and people
Yeah.
just like in behind the scenes who do a lot of uncredited work.
Yeah, and that sucks because I mean that's writing. I feel like session players are writing a lot of
Yeah.
times. I mean, there's times where it's okay, you got a guitar player, and they're just playing literally what, hey, play this chords that I wrote. But a lot of times, if a guy comes in and he's playing something that he came up with, that's writing. I don't understand how somebody who comes up with like some because I mean this Grammy situation, it was like there's a lot of writers on the song that they will credit. So like somebody comes in and they're like, hey man, you should say it this way. They get writing credit, but a guitar player who played the guitar for like most of the song is just a session player. That doesn't make
Yep.
any sense to me.
Yeah.
Also, engineers should get writing credit because I feel
Mm,
like or production credit.
yeah.
I feel like a lot of times if you're carving that kick to be what it is, that's
Oh
how
yeah.
is the dude who put the loops together from Splice more valuable to the record? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and that is true. I've heard about the guy who's like sitting in the room. It's like, I always thought this was something from movies or some people joked about, but it's
no,
apparently it's real. Where there's a guy in the back's like, you should say it like that or with this inflection or like you should say this,
yeah,
and then he just goes back on his phone. He gets a writing credit on
bro,
the song, but the engineer who yeah spent like
it's
spent
so
like 4 hours getting the snare drum right. I think we've all messed with a snare drum for like
like
way
for yeah,
longer
yeah.
than
Then we
we've
should
wanted
have,
to
yeah.
before. But the guy
That's
just did it for
production.
like 4 hours. It's like getting that snare drum just right. It just doesn't get a
He
credit on the
replaced
song.
all the producers' drums because they were trash. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah, or went
then
in
we,
and played a snare drum himself.
yeah,
I've seen that before where like artists will I have a drum set here
yeah,
we've done things where we had a floor tom. We were going through all these floor toms, but they sounded like too like sound too tinny and not
yeah,
like loud enough or enough bass. So we
yeah.
just like detuned a floor tom we had here
Mm,
and put a microphone underneath of it and then hit the top of it and it was like, oh, that's what we're looking for. And
wow,
I imagine that happens a
a
lot
lot of
in
time.
the
Yeah.
industry because you have you have those
Mm,
resources available to you.
yeah.
But it is wild that is seemingly how it works where there is a guy who just like is on his phone and it's like you should say it like this or
Yeah.
like our
You
DJ
will see a
Khaled
lot of
situation.
lawyers. You see a lot of lawyers on writing credits.
Lawyers on right.
You will
Okay.
see lawyers, managers
Wow.
on writing credits because they'll have deals where they'll be like in the game, man. Like there's managers who will have deals where they'll be like, hey, man, I will manage you pro bono, whatever,
Mm,
for a year, long as you give me a certain percentage of writing credits for a song. And there's no
mm,
way you can't say, well, he didn't write the song. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
if the artist is saying, hey, he was in studio writing the song with me, but it really is just a deal that they've worked out
Right.
to, it's the same with Grammys. It's just like, you'll see people who got Grammys aren't artists or
Mm,
writers. They're just lawyers or they're whatever because they have a deal
right.
with somebody to where, hey, you scratch my back, I'll send you some beats. I didn't have nothing to do with that song, but like, hey, I'm gonna put you as a writer on this song, so you can get a Grammy or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've seen that.
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to touch on was we talked about how music in film and at a baseball game or wherever at like a sports event can introduce people to music that they would in no other situation like or listen to, like that Quentin Tarantino film you
Yeah.
talked about. And one of those mediums I find that the most in is in video games.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked about Skyrim like when we
Yeah.
first walked in here, and I find myself and I know other people who have played this game find themselves listening to the soundtrack. And there's
Mm-hmm.
like no other world I can imagine myself listening to a
Yeah.
Skyrim kind of soundtrack in my own time. So it's this beautiful thing that's like
Yeah.
you can introduce yourself to all these different worlds through this, and video games are so unique is because it's not a start to finish moment with a video game.
Yeah.
It's so dynamic.
Yeah.
And there's dynamic music in video games that's so impressive. If you go from one place to another,
hmm
there are programs in the software, or the music is programmed in a way to where when you go from this area to this area,
hmm
meaning this song into this song, it'll dynamically change the key
Yep.
into the next song. And
Yeah. The
they've had that.
transition is amazing.
The
Yeah.
transitions are because
Yeah.
it's totally dedicated on where the player is.
hmm
So you decide when the music changes.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And so I'm curious of like,
hmm
what do you love the most about the world of Skyrim? How do you approach playing the game?
Man.
Do you role play good or bad characters? And what do you think the role of creating music to accompany an already existing visual medium like video games
hmm
compares to the dynamic nature of creating music for video games?
Yeah, man. That's a great question. For me, man, what I love about Skyrim is just how they created it with the concept of freedom in mind. So a lot of people might criticize Skyrim for being kind of generic with like the lore and everything. That's what I love about it, because it gives you, in no other game I play, I can kind of insert my own characters and it doesn't like completely fuck up the rest of the game, you know? Whereas in Skyrim is like, okay, I can create a whole like lineage of people and incorporate it into the game, and it doesn't, at no point will I feel like there's a conflict or there's some type of like breaking of the story or anything. So that's what I love about Skyrim. And then with mods, because I play mostly with mods, even though the vanilla game is amazing in itself, I play mostly with mods just because I feel like that allows me to create my own world. And I feel like being like African American, we don't really get a lot of games where we can like create a character that looks like us and like where they have like sensibilities. Like I think of myself in the world of Skyrim, like, and I'm like, okay, if I was black in this world, things would be different. You know what I'm saying? I think of like, oh, I have to like create an environment that speaks to that. And so Skyrim allows me to do that, because a lot of video games um kind of gloss over that whole aspect of how like race will play. Even though there's, like I said, in Skyrim they have like red guards and they do have different races. I feel like for me to play knowing what I know about race, they kind of like um gloss over certain aspects of race, obviously for the game. It's like that wasn't the intent behind that game at the time, to talk about the deep sort of like, even though they do, it's like more, they have lizard people and they have all this, so it's like a more general thing but not specific to like real life. And that's what a lot
Mm,
of people like about fantasy, is like, okay, we can ignore real life and the real world issues.
mm,
um but it's like, growing up the way I grew up, it's such a huge part of who I am that I can't ignore it when I play. Even when I play a game, it's like, okay, this would play out completely differently because of how I know people to be. And but it allows me to create um that type of reality and tension, and it gives me an opportunity to um make fantasy the way that I want to make it. Like, if as a black um creative, this is how I would approach fantasy, because I don't have like a fantasy game that allows me to do that. Where I'm just like, hey, it would be cool to have a game like an open world RPG that was just based in like Africa with a different timeline. Maybe we have countries like, you know, Wakanda. You know what I'm saying? It's just like this, that would be cool. You know what I'm saying? We don't have that. Africa hasn't developed enough as a continent of countries to create a video game industry. So like most of the stories that we see in video games are Western, or, American, European, or like Japanese, Chinese, right? And I feel like a Middle Eastern person might feel the same way. Like, we haven't developed enough yet to create video games that showcase how we view the world. So the stories that we see in a lot of games are either Western, um, based, or like the Japanese or Chinese like lore, and there's a different way of how you view the world when it's like, and how that shows up in video games. And it's something very subtle that you don't really notice. But if you see a lot of like um sci-fi or fantasy from Africa, or from like black people, like if you see like even Jordan Peele's movies, right? You see it has a certain perspective to where you're like, okay, and a lot of people see that as like, oh, um, the critics of that kind of thing, where they're like, oh, they're trying to do away with European sensibilities or whatever, and it's not really that. It's the same as when you play like Black Myth Wukong, right? Like a Chinese, they have a different way that they approach than Europeans approach fantasy. It's like a different everything down to like how the character behaves or like their sensibilities, what they care about. It's different, and it's not that it runs counter. Like there's definitely ways you can see similarities, but there are things where it's like this speaks to me more because this is something that because of my experience, because of the things that I grew up with, this was what would emotionally, this is what would, resonate with me a lot more. And so for me, like when I'm playing Skyrim, like I'm always playing like a red guard character. Like I'm always making a black character. This is the only game one of the only games I can make a black character. Like, and I have so much freedom with the character creator, to where it's just like, and then with mods, it's like, you can give them like black people's hair. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like cool to me to be a black character in this world and kind of like rewrite history in a sense of like, hey, we don't have to be like kind of side characters in this world. There's this world where I can be a main character. I can be influential in big ways to the story or whatever. And so that's what Skyrim is for me, because I would like to be able to write like a sci-fi or fantasy story. So Skyrim actually gives me opportunity to like kind of get into that and get into game development, because there's so much about mods and stuff where you're just like, now I'm using Nifscope and now I'm using Blender to like create this, or like to change this, or now I know how to like, kind of hack into some of the game creation files to make this mod work. And so, yeah, now I got like 3,000 mods.
Oh my gosh.
In my Skyrim.
Wow.
Yeah, literally.
3,000 is insane.
It's insane, man.
Wow.
3,000 mods. And I used to be one of those people that used to hear people say that. I'm like, what? No, you mean 300?
Yeah.
But no, like over the years, just keep adding more and more.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this new thing came out. So now it's like there are mods to like change the entire like plant system and stuff. And like now you can water the plants. So you have like a farming game in there.
Yeah.
Hunting
definitely.
and so it's like whatever. So it's hard for me to go to another game now.
Yeah.
Because I basically created a game I want to play.
Right.
And yeah.
And how do you find yourself thinking about the music of Skyrim?
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I actually turn the music off, because the reason I do that is not because I don't love the music. I love the original music.
Mm-hmm.
I make videos and I put like music over the videos.
Right.
So it's like, but I want the sound effects from the game. And so, but I love this original soundtrack. It's like, it's amazing. I actually, the main theme, I love that. Like, I love the sort of almost Gregorian chant sounds from that. Yeah. But it does, like, playing it originally, like the first 600 times I played it with the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So going from one scene,
like,
the first,
yeah.
yeah. So I was like, I didn't spend a good amount of time with the soundtrack, to where it's like, you transition from one area to the next, and the music changes, and I think it does it so well to where I didn't even notice the soundtrack at first. I just would feel it, and then it's like I didn't really realize how amazing the soundtrack was until I started joining the Skyrim groups, and people were talking about it. Yeah, and I was like, oh, well, this is actually pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like they did a really good job with this soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's really fascinating to see like the magic moment where you don't realize, or your brain is tricked into thinking, like when like Link swings a sword in a game and it makes like a sound.
Yeah.
Your brain's just like, yeah, of course it makes that sound.
Yeah,
but you don't realize like a programmer made it to sound perfect like that, to where your brain's like, yeah, of course it sounds like that.
Yeah,
that's the magic where I think that's where the magic for audio is when the audience doesn't notice the audio.
Yep.
It just feels, that's when you know you've done it
Like
right.
reverb, you know. It's like
Yeah.
you're not supposed to hear it. It's just,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so a great audio is, you know, you've done great audio when it starts to not be noticed anymore.
Exactly.
And like that happens with music, but it happens, you know, more, I think more intimately, or not, I guess more intimately in a way, because we don't think about it as much with like Foley work. And it's
Exactly.
like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, of course it sounds like that. But it's like, it didn't just sound like that when they recorded. It's like, no, they had somebody with like
Yeah.
2 boots on their feet, like
Yeah,
stomping through
doing
leaves to make it sound exactly like that. I love that world.
and mentioning like Zelda, man, like I just recently saw a video recently about the Guardians from Breath of the Wild. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you played that, but how
Yeah.
the noise, the music that plays when a Guardian is like sees you, and it's so like heart
Scary.
pounding, like
Yeah, the
scary.
piano's going
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's genius how they did that to where
absolutely.
yeah, I would love to see like a video making of how they created just the soundtrack and the sound design because the music for that, man, is beautiful, like
Breath of the Wild's music is
incredible.
top
That's
tier.
probably my favorite.
Top
Like,
tier.
it's top three for me is the music from Ocarina of Time. Love that,
Yeah.
and then Sonic, Sonic 2.
Sonic 2.
Yeah.
Green Hill Zone goes so crazy. John Baptiste did a cover of Green Hill Zone
I
on one
gotta
of
hear
his
that.
albums,
I
and I
bet
was
it.
like, "What?" I saw on the John Baptiste stuff, Green Hill Zone from Sonic, and yeah, they
I got it. Yeah, I got
it,
it. I
it,
gotta
it's
listen to that.
had to be one of those things where like he
Yeah,
just remembers it from a kid, being a kid. And it's like, let's
yeah.
cover this because this song goes
It slaps,
crazy.
man. It's a slap.
Yeah, and for people like in that jazz community to like bring video game music to a forefront, because like,
It's
you know,
perfect for
so
that.
many people in his like group or like his audience were like Green Hill Zone, Sonic,
Yeah, yeah.
video games. There's so much confusion, but then they listen to it and they'd be like,
This makes
this
sense.
is great. And
Yeah,
they made this in 8-bit. Like what? How? And
yeah. I
the
want to know how
music.
they made that back
And
then.
so going back to music through like making music through like uh, with restrictions or through
Mhm.
through some sort of a challenge or restrictions.
Yeah.
And I always look to old video game music
Hmm.
producers who are like, they're given this game pretty much when when they are told to do sound design, they've made they have all the bones and structure made. And so
Mm.
we had physical cartridges and we still have physical mediums now, but it'd be like, okay, listen, we have 70 megabytes max. We've used 67 of the megabytes. The rest can be music.
Yeah.
And that, because the music was just the last thing thought
Yeah.
about, because the game had to function properly and it had
Yeah.
to have a visual. And
Yeah.
then the last thing that would be done is music.
Music. Yeah.
And so they handed off to the producer. And I loved like just first of all, the visual of like the old studios in Japan where it's like there's the big office and
Mhm.
everyone's like typing away, coding, and then they have a soundproof room where there's like a guy with like a keyboard or a
Yeah.
bass guitar
Mhm.
going nuts in the other room, and he's having to compress every single thing.
It's
A lot
a
of them did piano roll or something, like where they
yeah.
draw in everything, but a lot of them would take like a bass guitar
Mhm.
and like play it and then compress it and bit crush it until it's like 8 bits and record it
Wow.
in like that.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
crazy.
and there's games that the original music is all bit crushed into this way to fit. And so they're just compressing and compressing and compressing until they make something that fits and that still sounds like music. And
I
they
didn't know that.
made absolute magic with the Pokemon soundtrack on the original like Game
For real?
Boy,
I'm gonna listen to that.
where they made this incredible soundtrack with so little space.
Oh, wow.
And they kept just taking digital information out until it fit, and now it has this really nostalgic and unique signature that is the 8-bit 16-bit sound.
Wow.
That, and there are games like Escape from Monkey Island, which is like a
Yeah.
PC game, where they have versions of it where you can plug it in. They have this old, it's pretty much a emulator or such that takes the digital information from the compressed soundtrack
Yeah.
and it reconverts it to like 32-bit or 24-bit.
Wow.
And so it will take this old bit crushed music and give its fidelity back, and you can hear it back like that. I thought that was incredible. And so there
Wow.
is like a high fidelity soundtrack behind a lot of these soundtracks. Some of them are made just knowing that it's gonna be compressed in this way, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to create it like this. But it's incredible to see, like, especially because now they have like hire full orchestras,
Yeah.
and hire them in big studios, and they don't worry about like the amount of space they have to take up.
Right.
And so they can just, the soundtrack for the new God of War game could
Mm.
be like, they still do compress it quite a lot. It's probably the full soundtrack's maybe 2.2 gigs
Oh wow.
max on the whole thing.
Wow. I didn't know that.
But back in the day, it'd be like 2 megabytes,
That's
and
insane, bro.
so they'd have it's this, through limitation, creating like something beautiful, like through all this pressure to create something, you create this diamond, just like
Yeah.
that's bringing it back to like the old boombox where it's like, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
record your rap verse on it, but you have to do it
Yeah.
straight through on magnetic tape. And so the world of music industry is just like, and the video games is really special
Wow.
because of that, like those limitations that were set on them,
Mm-hmm.
and like seeing the road that was paved by those people who, if they had initially just been given all the space in the world to work with, it may not have created the music that we hear today, because they had to just get to the absolute heart of what they wanted to communicate through it,
Yeah.
and just have the basic building blocks for it and almost nothing else,
Yeah.
and create what they have there.
Yeah. That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I need to check more into that. That's beautiful.
But do you have like about 10, 15 more
Yeah. Yeah.
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
For sure. Yeah. This is
We'll
dope.
have to do a part 2 at some point,
Yeah,
because
man. We could talk
I've
forever, man.
skipped about like literally like 35, 40 questions. So I'll just go ahead
Yeah.
and just skip to the end here. There's a lot.
No, I
But
love
didn't
these
realize.
questions, man. These are all great.
But yeah, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 at some point to
Mm-hmm.
cover all these. So we'll just do like the last 5.
Okay.
So can you tell us about the genesis of the Space Campaign Collective and the ideology behind it?
Yeah. Man, the space campaign was something that I originally came up with because I've always been into like space and NASA. Those have been huge influences for me. I think it started with Outkast. They had AT aliens, and that was a big thing for me, like growing up. Just kind of the whole alien and being an outsider. Like um, even when I was like a Christian rapper, I think I had an album called Galaxies. That was like my first real kind of project. And that's how like the whole Eons D name came from that. And so, because I used to go by like Preacher D when I was a kid, like it was like I was a preacher. And so, but I used to freestyle, and I had this freestyle called like it was called Eons Steep or something like that. And I said the word Eons in the freestyle. So
Mm.
my friends started calling me like Eons D after that. So that's what kind of stuck, and that's where the name Yons comes from. Like Jetson started shortening Eons to Yons, like just a Louisville like slang kind of thing, and so that's where Yons comes from. Jetson came up with Yons for real,
Mm.
but the space campaign was just something that it was my kind of like philosophy when it comes to art and music. It's like I'm always trying to find that new frontier of like creativity and like just kind of pushing the boundaries of myself, just starting out as a rapper, then being a producer, getting into audio engineering and video and whatever, just always seeing the horizon and being like, I want to go there. Um, and then also just kind of like even the way I think about things, just kind of being open-minded and allow myself to, um, think outside the box and kind of push the limits of my own like understanding of things. So that's where the space campaign came into it. And when I met Jetson, he literally had like a space tattoo. And his name was Jordan Jetson. It's like we just kind of like, so he further helped me to like um conceptualize the space campaign. So they were part of this collective called Doom with Ja'Cory Arthur. And so when I started coming around, like I kind of joined Doom, and then Corey Arthur stopped doing music, so they were like, "Hey, we need like a new name or whatever. So why don't we just be the Space Campaign?" So me, him, and Nick B and Deuce, um, we kind of was like we started to go by the space campaign, and that just kind of included whoever I worked on music with at the time. And I think even like you came along one time and we was like talking about, so it's, to me it's like all of my music friends are part of like Casey. You'll see Casey mention it a lot, or like anybody that I work with, and we kind of work with each other for like an extended period, is they kind of already have that philosophy with how they approach music. So it just naturally kind of became like um a quiet movement in the sense of like I don't like overly like try to force it. It just happens to where it's like people are into space. Like who doesn't like space? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like who what like person who's creative and thinking doesn't really like the whole idea of like, man, what's out there, you know? Um
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's just to me it's a intellectual uh artist like movement, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Yeah, I've loved seeing everybody like being involved in it and
Hmm.
like the music that's been created out of it. Um, so myself and I'm sure a lot of other people are wondering, how do you balance your various roles as an audio engineer, producer, teacher, husband, and father? And do you have any advice for young people getting into music production, into just creating music in general, or just young creatives who feel overwhelmed on where to begin and how to establish their sound in their
Yeah.
city?
Man, yeah, that's a good question, man. I'll be honest, man. I don't know if I've ever found the right balance, man, when it comes to all of those things, because it's all, like I said, it's always dynamic and always changing. I think just try, like put forth the effort. It's
Yeah.
like I'm I'm making it,
Hmm.
It's like I feel like I'm coming out a lot of situations good, and on the other end like intact. So I think just giving the effort, man, like really trying your best, putting your best foot forward. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some times where you kind of like go through some troubling times. You might go through some heartaches. You might create something that you don't like or that you hate, and it might make you feel like quitting. But if there's anything I could say is like, hey, um the sun will come up in the morning, so just keep going.
Absolutely.
Push through and um look at the bright side of things, because that's something I used to get hung up on early on. I feel like I would feel like I would have a bad song or a bad show, things that turn out how I wanted, and I would feel like, man, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. Like this is when I was starting to get up in age. I was in my like late 20s and like early 30s, and I feel like maybe I should, while I can, go back to school and get a degree in something else. Um, or maybe I should slow down with music, because doing shows and stuff is a lot of money and a lot of time, and especially if you become a parent, then it's just like you start feeling like, am I neglecting my family trying to pursue music? That becomes a question. And art is just one of those things, and entrepreneurship in general is just one of those things where you do have to always weigh those types of things, like even I'm doing this for my family. Like, at what point am I kind of being delusional about this and how far it can go, how much money it can make? And what point am I like sleeping on my potential and, the opportunities that I actually have? It's tough. So I feel like having good counsel, um, therapy is great. You know, it's something I didn't get into until I was later, but therapy is great for that. Like having therapy, having good counsel around you, people who are in your field, mentors to help you, because you always need somebody who's done it. Like, one of the worst things that I feel like I've done is try to do it kind of like um detached from people who've done it. Maybe following people who haven't done it, and like trying to get guidance from people who have no like success. That's like a mistake. You kind of want to be around people who are kind of living, or at least get counsel from people who are kind of where you want to be. Like that's the best way to success. People who are already in the position that you want to be in, mentoring you and telling you how to get there. That's what you do at a company. That's what you
Hmm.
do in every other field. You go to school and you're learning finance from somebody who's a professional at finance. And music and art, we kind of listen sometimes to a lot of people who unfortunately haven't really done what we want to do. and that can only keep you at that level where you are, where they are, because they might be giving you bad advice, or they might not want you to go further than them. And so I feel like the best thing you can do is find people. Maybe you have to go outside of Louisville, maybe online, maybe reach out to, like I happen to get a partnership with the guys I won a Grammy with, Pelham Jr., and they were already in the industry, doing sample packs, connecting with platinum selling artists, connecting with Splice and like Drum Broker, doing the stuff that I wanted to do. And so taking advice from them and from other guys like Daniel Steele, this one of my people that had given me advice over the years. He's somebody who has made like drums and stuff for MSX Audio and done stuff for Akai and even like Apple with Logic. So he's already doing sound design in the industry on a level that I want to get to. And he's a drummer and he's an artist. And so having these people kind of mentoring me and telling me, hey man, do this, keep going, was important because I did have feelings of stopping and quitting. Everything around me sometimes felt like you shouldn't be doing this. And a lot of times it's just because maybe where you are, there's no precedent for like what you're doing where you are. So you might have to get online to be like, you might, if you were in LA, this be normal. But in Louisville, it's like I'm doing sound design and I'm, making sample packs, and it's like, what? It's
Yeah.
like, bro, if you don't go to FedEx
Yeah.
or Ford, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and make some money. Yeah. So I think expanding like your network to where, and that helps with believing. Also a friend of mine named Jared. Shout out Jared Lafitte. Jay Lafay. He used to be a rapper in Louisville when I was in Christian hip hop. But he pivoted to using his musical, like he taught music lessons. He taught me a lot about music theory, but he used that to get into coaching. So he started becoming a coach for teaching businesses how to use their voices properly, like how to like enunciate or project your voice when you're talking and giving like seminar speech. And so he managed to go to a lot of different businesses because he went around to a lot of these people's houses to teach their kids piano lessons. So that turned into like, hey man, you helped my daughter with a piano lesson or whatever, and he might have I guess gave them a voice lesson on how to, hey, project your voice. It's like, man, you think you could like my employees at the company? So he ended up doing that for companies enough to where he ended up in Forbes magazine.
Wow.
And then he had a buddy from college that was a developer. So he developed an app to help companies to communicate with employees called Mandy AI. Ended up moving to Denver and was able to sell this app for a lot of money. Kind of became rich, like just off of like knowing how to pivot. So having somebody like him kind of mentor me in like areas of business and things like that, and how to use music in other ways outside of just being a rapper or like a producer, is huge, because you have to be able to adjust, especially now with the way technology is moving. Maybe instead of being a rapper, you create an app where your rapping skills can be used. Maybe it's our app to use rapping to teach kids how to, I don't know, enunciate better or like learn how to spell better or something. You know what I mean? Like there's so many ways to use our gifts and our talents to where we can still, it doesn't have to be such like, I guess, a diversion from our artistic side to go to something else that completely distracts from what we want to do creatively. It just might take thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, the tools and skill set that we're given can
Hmm.
help us navigate more than just like the usual alleyways or waters that we're used to or that we
Yeah.
see traditionally done. So I love that saying like you
Hmm.
you may have a gift with words and songwriting and poetry, but it doesn't have to just be rap. It can be using that skill to teach young people, about
Mhm.
vocabulary
Exactly.
and or metaphor
Because
and
you're an
writing
excellent
lessons.
wordsmith, man, as a
Yeah,
rapper.
that's a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah, yeah.
But Jans, I appreciate you taking the time to
Man,
talk with me today.
yeah.
The Laws of Motion, IOU, and Space Soul are out everywhere music is sold.
Man.
And Jans, thank you for helping to raise us up, literally, not just lyrically, physically, and not just on paper.
Nice little shout out, man. To physics on paper, man.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that one. I had a whole section on physics on paper just on
Man.
that. So
Oh
next time we
man,
get
I love
together,
you,
we'll have to
man.
do
I
that.
love you, man. This is beautiful, man.
Love you too,
I
man. Thank you
appreciate
so
it,
much
man.
for coming
Yeah.
on.